exercise I said you all should be doing is the overhead dumbbell press. Now, this is a good exercise, especially if you're doing it right.
So the overhead dumbbell press is probably one of the first shoulder exercises, if not the first shoulder exercise you're introduced to when you start going to the gym. And it's a great exercise for that muscle growth and increasing in muscle strength, because you're really stretching those muscles at the bottom of the movement. If you take your shoulders from 90 degrees to slightly rotating them inwards to 45 degrees, which would allow you to get a slightly deeper stretch.
Do I still do it? Is it my top 5? No, it's been demoted. The reason behind that is just the sheer amount of times I've injured myself trying to get the dumbbells into position at the start of the set.
I agree with this. So overhead shoulder press is an exercise I wouldn't necessarily recommend to anyone. I've been on the receiving end of a few of these injuries, especially trying to get those dumbbells into place. It's not necessarily about pushing the weight whilst they're in the position, it's about getting them up. One of my injuries was more or less when I was brand new to the gym. I used the brute force technique in order to get those dumbbells up. So I would severely arch my back in order to help get those dumbbells up. And getting those dumbbells up came at a cost of my lower back. So I had a few lower back injuries.
Gotten a little bit older now, more conscious about staying injury free. I actually do my pressing movements in a much safer starting position. So either I would use a machine or I would use a bar in a cage where the bar is resting on the support barriers.
These are great alternatives to the overhead dumbbell press. Firstly, if you're using a machine or the power rack, the weight starts in the starting position, so you do not have to have a fight with the weight in order to get into starting position. 2, if you're using a machine or a Smith machine, you're moving in a fixed plane. Therefore, all you've got to do is focus on controlling the weight. And 3, you don't have to worry about dropping the weight below your shoulder, as the lowest the machine go will be your starting position. And with the power rack, you could adjust the safety bars to your shoulder level, and it completely reduces the risk of injury.
The next exercise which I've recommended everyone should be doing is the dumbbell lateral raise. Obviously, the focus of this exercise would be primarily to focus on building up the mid-delt, which is the middle section of your shoulder.
So the lateral dumbbell raise is normally the go-to exercise to hit the lateral head of your delt, but it isn't necessarily the best exercise. The lateral raise movement is shoulder abduction, and that's more or less taking your hand from by your side and raising it so it's in line with your shoulder. This is a new movement. A lot of people don't necessarily know how to do this properly, and they start struggling once they get to the top, and this incorporates the traps, which isn't correct.
Is it in my top 5? No, it's been demoted as well. Reason behind that is just because there's so much of the range which isn't really being challenged. The resistance at the first third or even first half of the movement is minimal, so the length and portion of the delt is not really being worked.
So that you're only feeling resistance in the final third of the movement, there are better variations and equipment to use out there.
So I would suggest replacing that with the machine. I'm talking about the machine lateral raise where your arms are straight, and it's usually plate loaded, sometimes cable loaded, but my God, it is very, very good at building up your mid delts because you're just having so much resistance applied throughout the entire range of motion.
So the plate loaded lateral raise machine is a great machine, so that the movement keeps resistance on the shoulders throughout the whole range of motion. There's constant tension, so it reduces the reliance of momentum compared to dumbbells, so it's far easier to control, and it's great for hypertrophy training if you want to do more volume. It sounds great, right? But there's a but. The but is that this machine is extremely rare. I've been to a fair few gyms, and I've only been to maybe 1 or 2 gyms which have had this machine inside it. So if you are one of the lucky few that have a plate loaded lateral raise machine in your gym, make sure you make use of it.
The next exercise which I have recommended is the cable lateral raise. Now this exercise will still remain in the top 5, and it's also still a very good alternative if you don't have access to the machine lateral raise.
So the cable lateral raise is my go-to shoulder exercise for hitting the lateral head of my delt. I just love this exercise, and you more or less have the same benefits as the plate loaded lateral raise machine. So that the cables have adjustable height, this allows for varied angles of stimulation, giving you more range of motion. And the best thing about this exercise is it's great for mind-muscle connection, especially if you do a single arm cable lateral raise and work unilaterally, which is one arm at a time. If you're working one arm at a time, you can really focus on the contraction at the top of the movement.
And I would really recommend taking away the handles and just using cuffs instead. So you put the cuffs around your wrist, and just that little tweak where you no longer have to kind of squeeze a handle. You notice that there's a lot less engagement in the forearm, maybe even the bicep as well, and you just have more tension placed on the mid delt itself.
So that's a great little tip there, and because of this video, this was something which I incorporated into my shoulder day. I bought myself a pair of cuffs which really took my training to the next level. And like Mike says, if you use the cuff, you don't have to worry about squeezing onto the bar or the handle, fatiguing your forearm in the process. So if you want to check that out and take your training to the next level, I've left a link to cuffs below in the description.
Rear delt cable fly, so you can do it seated or standing, ideally seated in front of a cable crossover station. And I think I would more than likely now do it one arm at a time.
Cable rear delt fly is a great exercise, as again, that we're using the cables, you have constant tension throughout the whole movement. I much rather do this exercise single armed also. That's because if you're working both your delts at the same time, you might give one of your rear delts a little bit more of a squeeze at the top. So if you're doing this single armed, you could just give 100% of your attention just to one arm at a time.
It's obviously going to take longer. The fact that you probably are going to have to do higher reps means it's going to take even longer just to do this exercise. But when you do it one arm at a time, it just gives you that focus required to really ensure that your form is on point and you can really isolate the rear delt.
And now you're using the cable, you can modify the cable position to target different areas of your rear delt, and it's just a much better alternative to doing the dumbbell rear delt, just because it's harder to cheat that you're on a cable compared to the dumbbell variations. Momentum might come into play unless you have your chest on a bench, but because of the constant tension the cable gives you, this maximizes rear delt engagement. So this is by far the superior variation.
And the last one, the reverse pec deck machine, I would still keep this in for sure, because you're getting a great amount of resistance from the very start of the movement throughout the range of motion which you're going through.
So the reverse pec deck provides support for the torso, ensuring strict form, which is way better for stability and isolation. Again, unlike the free weights, especially the dumbbells, the tension remains steady throughout the whole movement. And now you're seated, there is minimum strain on your lower back, so there's less lower back involvement, which is always a pro. And now you're using a machine, there's guided motion, so it's beginner friendly, it's simple to use and execute.
They would be my top 5. Now, I would still agree with the approach of having 2 rear delt focused, 2 mid delt focused, and maybe 1 front delt focused to have that, balanced out, proportioned shoulder.
In my opinion, that's too many exercises to be hitting on your shoulders on one day, unless there's a shoulder day 1 and a shoulder day 2. On shoulder day 1, you do a plate loaded shoulder press machine, cable lateral raises, and pec deck. And on shoulder day 2, you do a racked overhead press, plate loaded lateral raise machine, and finally cable rear delt fly. And across both those shoulder days, you have one compound movement which hits both your front and your lateral head, a lateral raise variation which strictly hits your lateral head of your shoulder, and finally a rear delt variation which strictly hits that rear delt.
The majority of people, even those that are lifting and have been lifting for a while, if you put them side on and get them to look in the mirror, you'll just notice their front delt is a lot more developed than the rear and mid delt. So they should be doing the majority of their shoulder training focusing upon those areas.
So I totally understand Mike's explanation to why he's only going to be doing 1 front delt exercise. That's also because if you do a lot of incline chest movements, this does incorporate a lot of front delt too. So a lot of people are getting additional front delt work without them knowing. It's great advice, and it does give you something to think about if you're unaware of this. But anyway, here is Mike's 5 shoulder exercises. Let me know below if you agree with them. Let me know if there's anything you will swap out. And also let me know below your 5 favorite shoulder exercises. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And watch this next video.